My name is Gloria Harrison, and I am 73 years old. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by desert landscapes and luxurious homes. Life after my husband passed away had settled into a calm, predictable rhythm. I spent most of my days managing my work as a luxury art dealer, a profession that I had built over decades with patience, eye for beauty, and business sense. My days were structured around gallery meetings, private showings, and managing acquisitions and sales. I enjoyed my independence and the freedom that came with being a widow. I was financially secure, emotionally stable, and connected with my two children, Nathan and Sophia. Despite my age, I enjoyed living fully. I would often take early morning walks around my neighborhood, admiring the desert flora and the soft light over the mountains. I would meet a few friends for lunch or attend art auctions and gallery openings in the city. My life was quiet but fulfilling. My children, Nathan and Sophia, were grown and independent, but they made it a point to check in regularly. Nathan, my eldest, was 35 years old, and Sophia, my daughter, was 33. Both had careers of their own, but never failed to remind me that family mattered. Our relationship was warm and loving, built on years of mutual respect and care. Even though I was content, there were moments of loneliness. The house felt empty sometimes, and I missed the laughter of my late husband. I often found myself reflecting on life, my accomplishments, and the people who mattered most. I had learned to enjoy my own company, but at times, I wished for companionship, someone to share small daily joys with, someone who would understand me beyond my financial success. I knew I was financially strong, but I also realized that money could never replace genuine human connection. My days were simple, yet busy. Mornings were for planning gallery viewings or reviewing art acquisitions. Afternoons were for meetings, phone calls, and checking emails. Evenings were quiet, spent reading, occasionally attending charity events, or having dinner with Nathan and Sophia. Despite the structured life, I always felt secure. I had spent years making careful decisions, building my wealth, and ensuring that my children would be well provided for. I had never imagined that this sense of security would soon be challenged in a way I could never foresee. It was during this calm and predictable period that I first noticed subtle changes in my daily life. A sense of anticipation, a shadow of unease, began creeping in. I did not know it at the time, but soon I would face a situation that would test not only my intelligence and patience, but also the very trust I placed in the people around me. My life, which had been steady for so long, was about to take a dramatic turn, and I would need to act wisely to protect everything I had worked for, including my own peace of mind. My children, Nathan and Sophia, were central to my world. Nathan, being the eldest at 35, had always been protective of me. He was analytical, cautious, and naturally inclined to notice details that others might miss. Sophia, 33, had a more empathetic nature. She was intuitive and could sense emotions and intentions with uncanny precision. Together, they kept me grounded. Their visits were often filled with laughter, reminiscences of our past, and discussions about current life events. I cherished every moment with them. Even though they were adults, I often felt that the bond we shared went beyond mere parent-child relationships. It was a partnership of love, respect, and mutual care. One afternoon, Sophia stopped by unannounced with a freshly brewed pot of coffee. We sat on the patio, surrounded by the warm Arizona sunlight, and talked about my recent art acquisitions. Nathan called during our conversation, his voice carrying concern. He had noticed a new presence in my life, a man who had been increasingly frequent in my social gatherings. "Mom," he said, "are you sure about this guy? Something about him doesn't feel right." Sophia nodded in agreement. I smiled politely, appreciating their concern but reassured them that I was careful. I had always been cautious about who I allowed into my personal life. Despite their warnings, I found myself intrigued by the man they were talking about. His name was Victor Langley. He appeared sophisticated, well-mannered, and intelligent. He shared an interest in art and culture, which immediately drew me in. At first, I dismissed my children's concerns as typical parental protectiveness. After all, Nathan and Sophia had never fully understood my social and professional circles. Their caution, while appreciated, felt like an overreaction to a man who seemed genuinely kind and articulate. Victor began showing up at gallery events where I exhibited art, always with a polite smile and considerate demeanor. He remembered details about previous conversations, complimented my taste in art, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. I found his company pleasant. He was attentive without being overwhelming, respectful without seeming distant. There was a comfort in his presence, a familiarity that was both surprising and inviting. Yet, even in those initial days, there were subtle signs that I couldn't quite place. A fleeting glance, a question that felt slightly too personal, a curiosity about matters I usually kept private. I noticed them, but ignored them, focusing instead on the comfort of human connection after years of solitude. I did not realize that these early interactions were just the beginning, the opening act of a story that would soon challenge every instinct I had honed over decades. Victor Langley's charm grew gradually. He became a constant presence at events I attended, always appearing at the right moments, always ready with a word of admiration or insight. It was flattering, and in my years of experience, I had learned to recognize genuine social grace. His mannerisms were impeccable, his gestures thoughtful, his attention sincere, or so it seemed. Over time, I allowed him into my life, sharing casual dinners, afternoon walks, and conversations that extended well into the evening. Nathan and Sophia continued to express subtle concerns. Nathan observed, "Mom, he knows too much about your schedule, your meetings, even your private contacts." Sophia added, "I just have this feeling. I can't explain it, but something about his attention feels calculated." I acknowledged their observations politely, but believed that after decades of navigating complex social and business networks, I could discern intent. I felt confident in my ability to judge character. Victor, however, never appeared overtly suspicious. He complimented my art, discussed cultural events, and expressed admiration for my children. He was, on the surface, perfect. This perfection made it difficult to question him openly. Friends and acquaintances also spoke highly of him, reinforcing the idea that he was a respectful and considerate gentleman. Yet, beneath this facade, subtle inconsistencies began appearing, small questions about my finances, casual remarks that hinted at an interest beyond friendship, and occasional attempts to steer conversations toward personal wealth. I began noticing these signs but tried to rationalize them. Perhaps he was merely curious about my profession, my expertise, or the lifestyle I led. I wanted to trust, to enjoy human connection, to feel companionship again after years of solitude. But a quiet part of my mind began to register unease, a faint warning signal that something might not be entirely as it seemed. In retrospect, these early encounters were crucial. They were the first indication of Victor's intentions, subtle enough to be dismissed, but clear enough for a careful observer to notice. They were also a test of my instincts, patience, and discernment, the very qualities that would later become essential in protecting myself and my fortune. Victor's curiosity became more focused over time. During casual conversations, he began asking questions about my art collection, the value of specific pieces, and my methods of acquisition. He asked about bank accounts, investment portfolios, and financial planning in ways that seemed oddly intrusive. Initially, I brushed it off as professional interest, assuming that a man of his social standing might have legitimate curiosity about wealth management or art investments. Nathan and Sophia grew increasingly concerned. Nathan, analytical as ever, said, "Mom, I think he's trying to map out your assets. He's asking things no friend would ask." Sophia added, "He's charming, yes, but there's an undercurrent. He's probing for information that isn't meant to be shared." Despite these warnings, I continued to engage politely with Victor, thinking that overreaction might strain relationships unnecessarily. I reminded myself that trust and caution could coexist. Victor's attention to detail made him appear trustworthy. He remembered minor facts about my past, recalled names of galleries I had visited years ago, and seemed genuinely interested in my children. At first glance, he seemed supportive, caring, and attentive. But the repeated inquiries into finances and personal assets began to weigh on me subtly. I noticed a pattern, a persistent, calculated curiosity that went beyond ordinary friendliness. I began observing him more critically, noting moments when his questions shifted from casual curiosity to pointed interest in my wealth. These observations were reinforced by small inconsistencies in his stories and behavior. While he maintained a facade of charm, his interest in personal finances was growing more insistent. This realization was uncomfortable, but important. It marked the beginning of my awareness that his intentions might not be entirely honorable. Despite my growing unease, I continued to interact with Victor. I maintained civility, enjoyed the pleasant aspects of our conversations, and cautiously tested his reactions to discussions about money. My children continued to advise vigilance. Nathan said, "Mom, please don't let yourself be manipulated. He's probing too much." Sophia warned, "Trust your instincts. If it feels off, it probably is." Victor, however, was careful. He never pressed aggressively, but framed his questions as casual curiosity or shared interest. He complimented my art, praised my business acumen, and appeared genuinely interested in family dynamics. This calculated charm made it challenging to confront him directly. I realized I needed patience, observation, and strategic thinking. I could not allow appearances to deceive me. The first 5 points mark the initial calm, the charm, and the subtle red flags. Gloria is aware enough to notice unusual behavior, but not yet fully prepared for the coming confrontation. Her instincts are sharpening, her children are alert, and the stage is set for the challenges ahead. One late evening, everything changed. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from reviewing an upcoming art auction, when I heard a faint voice drifting from the living room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly approached the door. To my shock, it was Victor, speaking on the phone in hushed, urgent tones. His words were deliberate, calculated, and unmistakably cold. "Once she signs the papers, everything will be mine. Just a little more time. I'll handle it." The room seemed to shrink around me. My hands went cold and my heart raced. The man I had thought was courteous, considerate, and charming suddenly revealed a different side: greed, manipulation, and an intent that I had never imagined. The calm and pleasant evenings we had shared suddenly felt like a facade. I realized I was no longer just a cautious observer. I had become a potential target in a scheme that threatened everything I had built over decades. I retreated to my bedroom, my mind racing. Thoughts collided. My life's work, my art collection, my $800 million fortune, my children's future. How could someone so smooth, so seemingly intelligent be plotting against me so blatantly? I replayed past conversations, minor incidents, and questions he had asked. Each one suddenly seemed to fit together, revealing a pattern I had overlooked in my desire to trust and feel companionship again. Sleep eluded me that night. Instead, I reviewed every detail I could recall about Victor's behavior. I thought about my children, Nathan and Sophia, and the countless times they had warned me. For the first time, I understood that their concern was not overprotectiveness. It was prescience. They had noticed the subtle signs, the questions, the persistent curiosity about personal matters that no friend or admirer would normally ask. By morning, I made a decision. I would not act rashly, but I would act wisely. I needed a plan that would ensure my safety, my peace, and my fortune. It was clear that Victor's intentions were not aligned with genuine affection. His focus was entirely on the wealth I had accumulated over a lifetime. The revelation of his true motives ignited a determination in me that I hadn't felt in years. This night was the turning point, the moment I moved from being a passive observer of my life to an active protector. I would confront the situation strategically, leveraging my experience, my knowledge of law and finance, and the support of my children. I knew that patience, intelligence, and caution would be my strongest allies. From this point onward, I realized that I would need to act not only for myself, but also to safeguard Nathan and Sophia's future, ensuring that Victor would have no opportunity to exploit or manipulate any of us. The next morning, I scheduled an urgent meeting with my attorney, Mr. Reynolds, a seasoned lawyer with decades of experience in estate management and family law, listened attentively as I recounted everything I had overheard the previous night. His expression remained calm but serious, signaling the gravity of the situation. "Gloria," he said, "what you have described is a clear attempt to manipulate and gain unlawful access to your assets. If marriage were to occur without proper protection, you could be putting your entire estate at risk." I felt a surge of urgency. Decades of work, investment, and careful decision-making were all potentially vulnerable. My children's future, the legacy I had intended to leave, and my peace of mind were at stake. Mr. Reynolds explained the mechanisms I could employ to protect myself legally. One option stood out: creating an irrevocable trust, which would transfer all my assets to a legally protected structure, out of Victor's reach, while still allowing me to live comfortably and continue managing my daily affairs. We discussed the technicalities in detail. He explained how the trust would operate, what documents would need to be filed, and how to do it discreetly to avoid tipping off Victor. Every clause, every stipulation, was scrutinized and planned with precision. I felt a sense of relief knowing that the law could provide a shield, but also a sense of determination. It was time to act decisively. I left the meeting with a clear plan. I would create the irrevocable trust and simultaneously begin documenting Victor's interactions with me: emails, phone calls, meetings, even casual conversations. Everything could be valuable evidence if needed. My approach had to be methodical, calm, and deliberate. Patience would be as important as speed. By mid-morning, I began coordinating with Mr. Reynolds and my assistant to arrange the trust documents. I also set up a secure method to record conversations discreetly. Every move had to be calculated. Victor could not suspect that I had uncovered his intentions. If he did, he might escalate his efforts or attempt to manipulate the situation in ways I could not control. The days that followed required vigilance, attention to detail, and emotional control, but I was prepared. This step marked the beginning of my active defense. It was no longer a question of whether Victor was trustworthy. I knew he was not, but a matter of how effectively I could safeguard myself and my family while keeping him unaware of my preparations. My mind was focused, my determination unwavering. Within a few days, the irrevocable trust was established. Every asset I owned, my art collection, bank accounts, properties, and investments, was legally transferred into the trust, with Nathan and Sophia designated as beneficiaries. I retained only a personal living fund for day-to-day expenses. ensuring that my lifestyle could continue uninterrupted while Victor had no access to the estate. The sense of security was immediate. I knew that legally, Victor could no longer manipulate me through the threat of marriage, but I also knew that the battle was not over. He remained a presence in my life, charming, attentive, and subtly probing. I had to continue the facade of normalcy, acting as though I was unaware of his intentions. This required constant vigilance, patience, and emotional control. I also began systematically documenting all interactions with Victor: emails, texts, casual phone calls, and even in-person meetings were carefully recorded and archived. Every question he asked about assets, every suggestion about joint finances, and every attempt to influence my decisions was preserved as evidence. My strategy was simple: let him reveal himself through his own actions while maintaining my composure and control. Nathan and Sophia were briefed in general terms. I told them I was taking steps to protect the family legacy without disclosing every detail of the trust. Their support was invaluable. They acted as confidants and allies, providing advice, emotional reinforcement, and assistance in monitoring Victor's behavior. Their presence reminded me of the stakes and strengthened my resolve to handle the situation carefully and decisively. By the end of this process, I felt empowered. I was no longer vulnerable, nor was I reacting impulsively. Every step was calculated, every action was strategic. Victor, unaware of the changes, continued his charm, unknowingly exposing himself further. This combination of legal protection, evidence collection, and psychological strategy would soon place me firmly in control of the situation. Victor's behavior began to shift as he sensed subtle resistance. He became impatient, pushing for closer interaction, asking questions that were increasingly pointed and personal. I continued to play along, maintaining the appearance of trust while internally remaining fully aware of his intentions. The contrast between his impatience and my calm composure created a dynamic where he believed he was in control, but in reality, every step he took was being monitored and recorded. During this time, I attended gallery events, meetings, and social functions with Victor, acting as if nothing had changed. I complimented his insights, laughed at his jokes, and engaged in discussions about art and culture. Outwardly, our relationship seemed cordial and affectionate. Inwardly, I was carefully observing, documenting, and preparing for the moment when I would reveal the truth. Small incidents began revealing his true nature. Comments about my wealth disguised as curiosity, casual remarks about inheritance, and persistent attempts to suggest cohabitation or financial partnerships all became evidence of his intentions. Each interaction was recorded, archived, and analyzed. I knew that patience would be crucial. Any premature confrontation could alert him and complicate the legal and emotional resolution. I also discussed these observations with Nathan and Sophia, who provided reassurance and practical advice. They reminded me to maintain appearances while ensuring no detail went unnoticed. Their insight and involvement made me feel stronger and more confident. We formed a quiet, unspoken alliance. Victor would continue to believe he was in control, while we held the real power. By this stage, I was fully aware of the psychological dynamics at play. Victor relied on charm and perceived influence to manipulate. I relied on patience, strategy, and legal safeguards. The balance of power had shifted subtly but decisively. The foundation was laid for the eventual confrontation, ensuring that when the moment came, I would emerge not only safe, but victorious. As days passed, Victor's impatience intensified. He began dropping subtle hints that he expected more from our interactions. Casual remarks turned into pointed suggestions about joint finances, shared assets, and even cohabitation arrangements. The man who had appeared charming and respectful now revealed glimpses of his true nature. calculating, self-serving, and increasingly desperate to gain access to my wealth. I maintained the facade of trust and cordiality. Outwardly, I smiled, conversed, and appeared engaged. Behind the scenes, I continued to record every interaction, maintain secure backups of emails and messages, and update my attorney with any developments. This dual approach, appearing unaware while documenting every detail, was critical. It allowed Victor to reveal his intentions while providing me with the evidence necessary to act decisively when the time was right. During this period, Nathan and Sophia became even more involved. They monitored his communications subtly, helped review interactions, and provided feedback on his behavioral patterns. Their involvement reinforced my position and ensured that no detail was overlooked. I felt a renewed sense of confidence. By the end of this stage, the groundwork for confrontation was complete. The irrevocable trust had secured my assets, the evidence collection was thorough, and Victor was unknowingly exposing himself further with each attempt to manipulate. The dynamics had shifted. Victor, confident and impatient, was still unaware that his plans were already failing. The moment for revelation and resolution was approaching, and I was fully prepared to act strategically to safeguard my wealth, my peace, and my family. Victor's impatience reached a tipping point. He began insisting on more direct access to my life, casually suggesting discussions about merging finances and joint decision-making. The man who had once appeared refined and charming now revealed a sense of entitlement that was hard to ignore. Every word, every suggestion, every carefully disguised question indicated that he believed he had leverage over me. Yet, I had long prepared for this moment. I had recorded his calls, archived emails, and saved messages, capturing the full extent of his manipulative behavior. I decided it was time to confront the situation, but not recklessly. My approach would be strategic, calm, and undeniable. I continued to act as though I was unaware, responding politely, laughing when appropriate, and maintaining the facade of cordiality. Victor believed he was in control, but every interaction he had with me was documented meticulously. I knew that when the moment came, the evidence would speak louder than any words I could say. Meanwhile, Nathan and Sophia remained my silent allies. They monitored communications and offered insights, helping me anticipate Victor's next moves. Their support strengthened my confidence and reminded me that I was not alone in this battle. Together, we had built a strategy that combined legal protection, documentation, and psychological insight. It was a calculated game, and I had the advantage of patience and foresight. Victor made one final attempt to pressure me into accepting his demands. He casually mentioned cohabitation rights, implying that proximity and emotional closeness would entitle him to half of my estate. He had no idea that legally, he had no claim. I responded with polite neutrality, careful not to provoke suspicion while preparing the final revelation. I knew that once I revealed the truth, he would have no way to recover. The stage was set. The combination of the irrevocable trust, thorough documentation, and strategic patience meant that Victor's plans were already unraveling. He remained oblivious to the fact that his own actions were providing the evidence needed to protect myself and my family. This moment marked the final stretch before the inevitable confrontation, where the illusion of control that Victor held would collapse entirely, leaving him powerless and exposed. The day of confrontation arrived subtly. Victor attempted to initiate a discussion about our future together, hinting again at shared finances and potential access to my estate. I invited him into my study under the pretense of reviewing some art pieces. Once inside, I calmly placed my phone, recordings, and printed evidence on the desk between us. The expression on his face shifted instantly, from smug confidence to disbelief, and then fear. I spoke slowly and clearly. "Victor, These recordings, emails, and messages reveal your intentions. Every attempt you've made to manipulate or gain access to my assets has been documented. My calm voice contrasted sharply with the panic beginning to rise in his eyes. He stammered, tried to explain, but the evidence spoke louder than any excuses he could offer. At that moment, my attorneys entered the room. The legal weight behind my preparations became tangible. Victor's hands trembled as he realized that not only had I anticipated his moves, but I had also outmaneuvered him completely. There was no room for negotiation, no way to claim any part of my fortune. The man who had believed he could manipulate and control my life was suddenly powerless, exposed by his own actions. The confrontation was decisive, yet controlled. Victor attempted to plead, but it was too late. The irrevocable trust legally protected my assets, and the documented evidence legally undermined his claims. Every attempt to assert influence, every subtle threat, and every manipulative conversation had been recorded, creating a complete and undeniable record of his intentions. Nathan and Sophia observed silently from the adjoining room, their presence reinforcing the reality of family support. The combination of law, evidence, and preparation had ensured that the confrontation was not only successful, but also conducted with dignity. Victor's departure, forced by legal authority, marked the end of his influence over our lives. Victor left with nothing, not a single asset, not a single opportunity to challenge the trust, not even a shred of leverage over me or my children. The sense of relief was immense. Years of careful work, decades of investment, and countless hours spent building a legacy had been protected. The man who had attempted to exploit my life and wealth was gone, leaving behind only a cautionary tale. Nathan and Sophia rushed to me, hugging me tightly. Nathan said, "Mom, you were incredible. You saw through him and protected everything." Sophia added, "We're so proud of you. You didn't just protect the money, you protected us too." Their words, filled with genuine emotion and admiration, were more rewarding than any legal victory. It was a moment of familial triumph, a reminder that vigilance, intelligence, and love for family could overcome even the most manipulative forces. The aftermath was peaceful. I took time to review the events, appreciating the calm that had returned to my home. The trust had secured the estate, the evidence had nullified Victor's attempts, and my children's presence reminded me of the true treasures in life: love, loyalty, and trust within the family. In the weeks that followed, life returned to a sense of normalcy. I resumed my work with art, attended gallery events, and enjoyed daily routines with renewed confidence. Nathan and Sophia continued to visit regularly, and our family bond grew even stronger. The experience had reinforced the importance of vigilance, preparation, and careful observation. I also reflected on the human dynamics involved. Victor's deception had been thorough and insidious, yet predictable in hindsight. His reliance on charm, patience, and manipulation had been countered by preparation, intelligence, and the unwavering support of family. I realized that knowledge, strategy, and trust in loved ones are essential tools in navigating both personal and financial challenges. Finally, I shared the story with Nathan and Sophia. "Love should never cost you your peace or your wealth," I said. "Protect both." They nodded, understanding the wisdom behind the words. My fortune, the estate I had built over decades, remained intact, but more importantly, my family's trust and safety were secure. Victor's betrayal had been a test of my judgment, patience, and strategic thinking. By acting calmly, collecting evidence, and relying on legal protections, I had not only preserved my assets, but also demonstrated to my children the importance of vigilance and foresight. The experience strengthened our bond, taught valuable lessons about trust and deception, and reminded us all that preparation and clarity are more powerful than charm and manipulation. Looking back, I realized that age, experience, and intelligence had given me the upper hand. I had outsmarted deception, preserved my legacy, and ensured that my family's future remained secure. The lesson was clear. Protect your heart, protect your wealth, and always act with wisdom and foresight.